Hello and welcome to Pluribus Unum's Fireside Chats. Not as good as FDR's, but hey, it's something. Now, this is going to be the last episode before you-know-what gets released. In retrospect, I probably should have just had the Q&A be this episode, considering what ended up happening with the Q&A, but I ended up deciding, I think that this subject would probably be better to be done before the big project or whatever. Alright, with that out of the way, let's get right into the news. First, Big L coming from the United Kingdom. Keir Starmer suspends seven rebel MPs over the two-child benefit cap vote. So basically, what ended up happening was that there was an SNP-sponsored bill that would scrap the two-child benefit cap in the UK. It was a thing that left-wing members of the Labour Party also expressed support for, but what ended up happening was that Keir Starmer basically said, we have to actually look and analyze the policy before we can commit to officially ending the policy or keeping the policy. Essentially, code for, we're not interested in abolishing the policy. And like previous votes in the past, there are some people who've been wondering, I wonder what'll happen with this bill, with Jeremy Corbyn even getting involved and saying that many left-wing Labour MPs should vote their conscience and vote to end the cap. And 7 Labour MPs did do so. John McDonnell, Rebecca Long-Bailey, Afsana Begum, Richard Bergen, Ian Byrne, Imran Hussain, and Zara Sultana. And as a result, all 7 of those MPs are kicked out of the Labour Party for 6 months for disobeying the party. And I know this isn't going to happen, but if I had to hedge my bets, I would say that these guys should probably form with Jeremy Corbyn and those left-wing MPs, independent MPs. They should all go together. Hypothetically. Even though that's not going to happen, but yeah. And before we get into the biggest news story that, unfortunately, I didn't get to cover in the last episode because I had to record it I recorded it on Friday, right before the news, broke. But, here's a news story. That's a local news story. Wife of NC Lieutenant Governor Mark Robinson ordered to pay almost $25,000 as part of a state probe. The wife of Lieutenant Governor Mark Robinson owes the government thousands of dollars due to claims filed by her nonprofit organization that shouldn't have been allowed, according to allegations outlined in documents released Thursday by the North Carolina Department of Health and Human Services. Yolanda Hill, the Second Lady of North Carolina, has 15 days to either pay back the money or appeal the department's decision. A DHHS spokeswoman said her and her nonprofit owe around $25,000. It comes as her work managing the nonprofit has undergone increased scrutiny during Robinson's run for governor. Some of his Republican opponents in the GOP primary this spring questioned the work behind balanced nutrition has done, and Hill has previously criticized the state's investigation into her business as being politically motivated due to her husband's prominence. Hill owned and managed Balanced Nutrition, which helped child care facilities obtain federal grant funding for food until it shutting down this year. The group was also allowed to use some of the funds towards its operations. State officials now say that some of the money it received should have never been handed over in the first place. They're charged with collecting the money on behalf of the federal government. So basically, what happened is she would go, what the charity's supposed to do is, child care centers, need money for food. So what the charity and fund is supposed to do is she's supposed to go to them, say, hey, we're going to have this grant specifically for this thing. And it's okay, we can do that. I don't know why they need to go through this private thing to do that, but whatever. But what would happen is sometimes she would submit the same receipt multiple times so that she could get money that is specifically made for the cause and keep some of the money for herself. And also, there are some cases where she literally would submit claims for groups and organizations that didn't even ask for any claims at all. Correct me if I'm wrong, but that sounds a little bit like money laundering. And this isn't going to bode well for the fact that, quite literally, she's the second lady. Her husband is literally running for governor right now. And this is a great thing to do for campaigning. Literally, Mark Robinson stole money from starving kids. You know, hypothetical campaign ad, North Carolina Democratic Party. If you're watching this video, you know, definitely a good attack ad. But of course, the biggest news story that has been coming from, like, technically last week is the fact that Joe Biden has dropped out of the presidential race. I never really got to fully discuss the ins and outs of it. I was basically agnostic on the situation, but situation's over now. What has happened in the stead of the election is the fact that now Kamala Harris is going to be the Democratic nominee. She's technically, there was like a whole last-minute scramble. Kamala Harris jumped in the race, and even though there was technically routes for people to, like, vie candidacies, everybody just kind of, like, was, like, going to steamroll through Kamala Harris's election. Because since it's happening so last minute, basically all of this is going to be going to the convention. Like, this is literally basically, like, old school, like how the old school of the presidential elections used to be. Used to be the primaries didn't even matter, because a long time ago, primaries didn't even exist, and it wasn't until, like, 1972, 1976, when the primaries actually became important. Little bit of a here and there, because some people argue that 1976 is kind of like really the first election where the primaries really mattered, but 1972 was kind of like the beginning of the process where the primaries did matter. I mean, it literally was so last minute. A lot of people actually kind of like randomly threw their hats in the ring. Like, Joe Manchin apparently said, hey, maybe I'll be interested in running for the nomination for president. And then literally everyone's just like, no, fuck you. And no one cares about you. So they're just like, oop, never mind. Marianne Williamson has apparently announced that she's going to be running like a fifth time. Like, literally, this is like the fourth or fifth launch of a campaign that it's just like, what are you even doing anymore? She's just trying to make sure that the money that she's getting is funneled through for whatever illegal endeavors that she's doing. And yeah, basically everyone wants to make sure that this process is as smooth and easy for Kamala as it was. Even Jason Palmer, the only guy who actually managed to win a decent amount of delegates against Joe Biden, like the big win for Joe Biden, like who I think literally is classified as the guy who beat Joe Biden in a primary, even he gave away his delegates to Kamala Harris to basically just smooth over this process. And as of recording this, she's effectively become the Democratic nominee. Like, she's not technically the Democratic nominee yet, because they're still going to have to do that whole, like, first they got to do that, like, weird, like, roll call prior to the election. Then they have to go through the actual, like, nomination and, like, nominate them. Because there's that whole weird thing where it's, like, they technically still have, like, weird legal parameters for, like, because if I remember correctly, it was like Ohio and like maybe one other state. Because I remember I just read a news story that literally said like 48 states have officially said like, yeah, there is basically no hurdle for Kamala Harris to be on the ballot. Because it's one of the big criticisms that many people had for switching to Kamala Harris. Because it's like, but what if she can't get on the ballot? Because we have to nominate the candidate specifically by this deadline. And I think the deadline is literally today, as I'm recording this, the 27th. Yes, I'm recording this on the 27th, like early on the 27th, because I recorded something yesterday, which you already saw on the channel. But as of today, she's basically the de facto nominee. She's got over 3,359 delegates. There are 590 that are still uncommitted, 37 of which being like pledged uncommitted delegates, with the rest of them being Biden delegates that haven't officially given their support to Kamala Harris. Like, most people have essentially jumped on the bandwagon and just moved on to, like, okay, now let's move on to the general election, whatever. Or move on to the thing right before the general election, which we'll get into as the second part of the story. But I want to give a special shout out to Bernie Sanders, who has explained that he has yet to endorse Kamala Harris. Even though literally every interview he essentially says, like, yeah, I guarantee you that I will by the end of the election. But he's basically giving some tepid, like, he's basically saying, like, right here, Senator Bernie Sanders, in a Friday interview at MSNBC's Ali Veshi, says why he has yet to endorse Kamala Harris. Sanders, in the interview, made it clear that he will work to elect Harris, noting that he's taking part in events and means to do so. Like, yeah, he's literally campaigning for her already. He's effectively endorsed her, but he is stating here, I think it is important for some of us to say, look, we know that there's a lot of big money within the Democratic Party. We want to make sure that Vice President is listening to the working class of this country, to the progressives as well. These are not radical ideas that I would hope very much we get specificity. Like, basically, he's calling out the fact that there were a lot of big Democratic donors that pushed for Kamala Harris to be replaced on the Democratic, like, ticket. Like, he's like, yeah, that is a fact. that is a literal fact that a lot of big Democratic donors did spend a lot of money to make sure that Kamala Harris would be the Democratic nominee against Joe Biden. I know people clowned on Bernie and AOC for stating this during the process, but this is a legitimate fact. I mean, yes, a lot of other people on the ground also wanted to have Kamala Harris be the nominee, or basically anything to get rid of Joe Biden as the nominee, but I'm just saying, that's just a thing. And Bernie's just trying to make sure, like, okay, but like, which Kamala is running? Is it the Kamala that said that my policies are insane and stupid, or is it the Kamala that copied my policies in 2020? That's basically what he's saying. He did the same thing with Clinton, he did the same thing with Biden. Like, he didn't endorse them until he was able to get, like, a specific concession out of them. All Kamala's gotta do is make one specific policy, like, known about her that is very much in line with Bernie, and he'll just endorse her. But with the presidential nomination out of the way, now that Vice President Harris has moved up, Democrats need a new vice presidential nominee, and it turns out people are looking very much for possible vice presidential nominees. And there are a ton of names that have been thrown out. I'm literally just going to go over all the names that have been thrown out so far, and, well, we'll hear all of the results based on how stupid and how base they are. There's Gretchen Whitmire, Gavin Newsom, Wes Moore, William H. McRaven, and, funnily enough, Joe Manchin. All of them have declined to be considered. And of those candidates I just listed, Manchin is the only one who literally was never considered, but randomly threw himself out as an option. Like, literally, he randomly just said, like, oh, I might be ready to be the vice presidential nominee. It's like, we don't like you, go away. And he's like, I guess I won't be the vice presidential nominee. It's like, and he's like graciously like, I decline the offer. It's like, nobody offered. Nobody, not a single human being offered. Alright, here are some names, like here are some other names that have been thrown out in the media. Former Governor of Pennsylvania, Tom Wolf. Governor of Colorado, Jared Polis. Governor of New Jersey, Phil Murphy. Senators Elizabeth Warren, Raphael Warnock, Bernie Sanders, Representative Jamie Raskin, Senator Chris Murphy, Amy Klobuchar, and Cory Booker. Those are names that have been kind of thrown out there, but don't really have that much of a leg to stand on. Like, I mean, the citation for Bernie Sanders being the vice presidential nominee is a Jacobin article, so take a wild guess and say that he's not really being that much considered for it. But we have 9 people on the short list, and the short list is where things get interesting. There's the former Director of Office and Public Engagement, Cedric Richmond. There's Secretary of Commerce, Gina Raimondo. There's Governor of Illinois, J.B. Pritzker. Secretary of Transportation, Pete Buttigieg. Of those 4, J.B. Pritzker declines, saying that he hasn't received the presidential vetting materials, but other people are saying that he has gotten presidential vetting materials, or he's at the very least on the short list. But the remaining 5 are the ones that a lot of media has been paying attention to for this race. Governor of Kentucky, Andy Beshear. Governor of Minnesota, Tim Walz. Governor of Pennsylvania, Josh Shapiro. Senator Mark Kelly from Arizona. And last, but certainly not least, North Carolina Governor Roy Cooper. Actually, scratch that. It's apparently pronounced Cupper. Or, like, he said, like, there's a whole video where he says, like, it's the sound in foot. Like, foot. I don't know. I honestly thought that I got it by just reading it, but, like, they type it all so fucking weird when they do the pronunciations, and then when they say it multiple times, it's like, wait, it just gets confusing. Whatever. It's Cooper. Cooper Troopers. Roy's Boys. And basically all 5 of those guys are seen as the finalists. Apparently, as I was writing this, it seems that some people were reporting different finalists. Like, some people say that Andy Beshear is one of the 4 finalists, but then Tim Walz jumped in the last second, and now people say that Tim Walz is one of the finalists. Some people even go so far as to say that the finalists are actually Cooper, Kelly, and Shapiro, and that Walz has already been booted of contention. But let's treat all 5 of these guys as if they are the options. And I'm going to tell you very clearly why I don't think each of these guys have positives and negatives. Andy Beshear, I'll be real, he doesn't really have anything, I'll be real. Like, generally, it's just like, oh, he's young, okay, and he's also, like, won in a red state, I guess. But, I mean, aside from that, I don't really see any benefits in his bid. Tim Walz, I don't really see any particular negatives in his bid, but I'm not really seeing a lot of the positives. I mean, sure, it's like, yeah, he can win Minnesota. Minnesota's already a pretty decently blue seats. Wow, amazing. Though most people will say that it just, like, some people are saying, okay, well, but it could also translate to the rest of the Midwest. It's like, okay, that's somewhat more fair. Josh Shapiro has the same notion that he could win the Midwest, like the Rust Belt. Those 3 states that people are, like, afraid, that people have been afraid of since 2016. And Kelly is seemingly a good play for Arizona, which is technically a swing seat. But the thing is, I don't really think, like, I'm going to be 100% real with a lot of these guys. I do not see Mark Kelly being that much beneficial, neither Shapiro, all because of 2 factors. Well, I mean, yes, I can see some of the benefits that they could hypothetically have, but let's just analyze it a little bit. One of the reasons why those seats went the way they did in those elections was not only due to obvious factors regarding Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump's platforms, but also due to the fact that in that cycle, Donald Trump was riding the wave of 3 Republican Senate incumbents that were basically touting him as their nominee. And now, the situation's reversed. Now in each of those states, Democrats are the holders, are the ones who are, okay, granted, Michigan isn't holding at the moment, they're an open seat. But Bob Casey is able to win heavy in Pennsylvania due to the fact that they have a Democratic senator. And Mark Kelly is similar but different, as his state has a very contentious Senate seat that is in play at that moment, Ruben Gallego versus Kari Lake. So they have other nationwide state seats, like federal seats that are in play in that seat. And North Carolina does not have that. North Carolina only has the Mark Robinson, Josh Stein governor seat. There's no Senate seats to hold us in this cycle. And we had a similar thing with the last cycle. In 2016 and in 2020, we had high-profile Senate seats that were seen as possibly pulling away factors into the presidential race as well. And Roy, despite the fact that those seats went red for both the Senate and the presidency, he managed to win, like, pretty decently. Well, I mean, not pretty decently, because that's like apparently denotes like a particular percentage point, but he did do well, and like, he was the Magic Man. I've said it before on this channel, Roy Cooper's the Magic Man. He's been on the ballot since 1987, and he has not lost a single seat. Even as he shifted from a specific, like, area candidate to a statewide candidate, Roy's managed to pull through, which is a very big play for North Carolina, which, if you remember, Biden was very heavily focused on trying to win North Carolina before he dropped out. Now, a lot of people try to, like, brush off, like, oh, we don't need to focus on North Carolina. We don't need to focus on North Carolina. That's just a seat that's going to be a very special, like, possible win. But it's like, but guys, you need to factor in a lot of things. If you're losing in certain areas, you also need to factor in a possibility to also win in certain other areas. Like, I mean, Michigan, if you lose Michigan, that's 16 electoral votes that you lose. But if you get North Carolina as well, you're able to make up 15. So instead of being down 31, now you're only down by 1. I see this sort of factoring of like, oh, we should just not focus on North Carolina. That's basically just the same thing you did with Ohio. You just gave up, and now that state is basically gone fully red. Same thing with Florida. It's like, you guys have given up on it. Why give up on a swing state? And look at the results. Like, North Carolina wasn't that far off electorally in 2020. You could easily make that up in this election if you try hard enough. And an easy way to do it is to pick a very popular governor in the state to ride the coattails. And unlike Kelly and Shapiro, there are no downsides. Kelly was one of the few senators that was blocking the PRO Act from passing. Shapiro has a very hugely anti-school record by being in favor of school voucher programs, and also is going to hate Palestinians. He hates Palestinians, comparing pro-Palestinian protesters to the KKK. In an era where you're already facing a lot of backlash from Union voters and Muslim voters, do you really want to make sure, do you really want to guarantee that those voting bases might not turn out to vote for you? Before people go in the comments, they actually changed their minds recently. Okay, so what? That doesn't matter. People will remember. It's called flip-flopping. This ain't a new factor in politics. And I haven't seen Roy flipping, because Roy doesn't need to flip. Roy's based. And I know that I already getting a lot of, shit for, my predictions about Tulsi Gabbard potentially being Trump's running mate. And I don't necessarily want to, 100% predict a Roy Cooper VP. But I'm just saying, there are a lot of things you gotta actually look at and realize, and start to realize that there's some patterns there that are a little bit interesting. One of the biggest ones being that she made many campaign appearances with Roy Cooper right before the Democrats switched to support her. And this happened also right before Joe Biden dropped out, she was at a North Carolina Democratic Party meeting. Also, of all the options, her and Roy Cooper already have a pre-existing relationship due to them being both attorney generals around the same time, working very frequently with each other. Again, I'm not necessarily predicting that Roy Cooper will be the vice presidential nominee, but I'm just saying he seems to be the smartest option. Now, there's one big thing that many people will point out. One of the big downsides a lot of people point out for Roy Cooper potentially being the for him being the VP is a potential worry about Mark Robinson, because basically one of the big concerns was basically what would happen if Roy Cooper left to be the VP? Would he have to give up his Senate? Would he have to give up his seat to Mark Robinson? No, we're not in a state like that. Roy Cooper does not have to leave to become the governor. He doesn't have to leave the position. If he leaves the state, he's still the governor. To which some people will then point out, well, if he's gone for a long period of time and Mark Robinson is acting governor, then won't they just steamroll a lot of bills to potentially go through that? It's no, that's a very lengthy process to steamroll bills in to do this. And also, if this happens, Roy Cooper can literally just come back to the state and just go, no. He can just veto it automatically. Roy there's literally nothing that prevents Roy from just going back, because that's literally what you do. Literally every time that happened, it's happened before. There's an article, and I'll include it in the description or in a comment, and it basically goes over the fact this has happened multiple times. Many people just didn't notice it because they wouldn't do anything with it. I mean, this has happened before, even on the presidential level. There are a couple of times where Dick Cheney was president, and things didn't automatically noticeably change. So yeah, if you haven't pieced it together, I am 100% pro Roy Cooper being the Democratic vice presidential nominee. If he's not the Democratic vice presidential nominee, I actually think that it will be a harder play for Kamala Harris to win. Speaking of winning, now let's move on to the main topic of this video. And it is me debunking this notion. I've heard a lot of people use the adage, the internet is not real life, usually in reference to politics, trying to dismiss online political activism as lesser than and not important. And I'm here to tell you all that you are 100% dead wrong. Online politics, in fact, matters a lot. We'll go a little bit more about this in the episode on Thursday, but this episode will be more off the cuff. One reason why people say this can stem from a lot of things, a lot of reasons can stem from this, and one of the biggest ones is simply a very small thing that actually does happen sometimes, where a prominent online figure will actually run for office. The most infamous example I can think of recently is Cenk Uygur, who ran for Congress in 2021. And despite the fact that he has a very large audience, he did not get a vote total that really warranted that support. And in an element, I could actually understand this because of what the what the Thursday's project was originally gonna be. See, I guess I'll use this time to a little bit explain what the project actually is for those who might not know and for those who might not be interested. Okay, so originally the video that would have been released on Thursday was actually scheduled way long ago, literally. In May of 2021, I wrote a script, I at least began writing a script known as The Internet's Presidential Candidates, because I noticed that in each presidential election, at least up to that point, there was at least one or two candidates that blew up online, made a huge message of being online, whatever. we all know the candidates that we're thinking of. Like, to me, the two candidates that I was thinking of were like Ron Paul, Andrew Yang, and to an extent like Trump and Bernie. Like, yeah, those guys. Like, we know that every single cycle there's at least one or two candidates that like does a big thing on the internet. And yeah, there are a couple of other candidates that you can name. I wanted to do an interesting fun fact, but I'm not gonna say what it is because I want to save it for that video. But another example came from the fact that in the 2000 election, two candidates that did really well online were John McCain and Bill Bradley. They're not mentioned in this video. And I figured simply just making a short, like not a short video, but it would be like a normal length video that would have explained that. It was kind of just, yeah. But then, as I was doing research into that and made that episode and I was ready, I literally even had plans for that video to be released in like 2021 or 2022. But then I started thinking about like beyond just online candidates who do well online, and I started thinking about how, like, especially when I was actually writing it, it was literally like you could see trends. Like, I mean, I would write the segment about Ron Paul, and then I would write the part about like Donald Trump and the alt-right, and be like, huh, yeah, that's weird. A lot of these people literally came from the Paul campaign to the Trump campaign. Huh, that's weird. Then I started thinking like, hold on there. I started realizing some trends that happened. I started seeing like, I could see like the rise of the Bernie movement, and then seeing it being echoed in the Yang movement, and also the in between about like the inspiration that Bernie had overall in the 2020 campaign cycle, due to how each of the candidates ran their campaigns, not just through copying his platform, but also through copying like literally the style that his online supporters did. And, of course, the rise of, like, the Justice Dems and all this stuff. So I started thinking, like, hold on there. And I started thinking a bit more beyond electoral politics. So I began drafting a different video called Political Eras of the Internet. I began drafting it on December 20th of 2022. And it was just, like, a short, like, list, like, where I literally just had, like, oh, this era of the internet, this era of the internet, this era of the internet. Because you could also see, like, there were eras of the internet, like, this era of the internet was pretty different than this era and this era. Like, you couldn't bring up 2000 and then 2016 and have the same politics. Or, like, of course, different things would happen in those eras that would dictate a shift in the politics of the sphere. For example, you would see a group of anti-authoritarians randomly spurred up of the moment through something that big happens on the internet, like let's say there's a government censorship bill that happens. Then, through the outspurts of those movements, you would see anti-authoritarian right-wingers and anti-authoritarian left-wingers, birthing two completely separate political movements that had a similar goal to an extent. And you could also see how some trends kind of weirdly shifted into completely different directions. How online atheist skeptics from the year 2006 somehow would randomly spurt into literal neo-fascists. Like, yeah, that is weird. Like, Sargon of Akkad literally posting videos about, like, I think that atheism is the moral superiority of the world, and this religious blah 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 is cringe. And then, literally, now you go to his channel, it's like, and his videos are about ranting about quote-unquote multiculturalism in the West. It's like, huh? How did you get from this to this? So I started doing research into that subject, and yeah, I thought it was a very interesting topic to talk about. Because this is important. Like, yeah, I mean, learning how a bunch of online skeptics turned into, like, borderline Nazis, and then translating that into how now there's, like, a rising Christian nationalist movement in America to combat Muslims, yeah, that is very important. And to ignore the connection is just weird to me. Because, yes, I mean, there is a connection. The Amazing Atheist, for lack of a better term, he said it himself. He had a role to play in Trump's election by overplaying the criticisms towards Hillary Clinton and downplaying all the criticisms towards Trump and jumping on the whole, like, SJWs are bad, and then people were like, oh yeah, Trump says SJWs bad, so ergo he must be a good candidate, right? Like, all of, if not most of the online politics that we have now are directly inspired by elements and events that happened long ago. Like, I mean, if I didn't have access to the internet, I wouldn't be I wouldn't be where I am today. Like, I mean, yeah, I have like actual books about actual politics, but like, yeah, I wouldn't be politically where I am today if I didn't have access to the internet that exposed me to more information than I had before. And it's a similar thing for other people. Like, I mean, these weird random fascists online, they spew on information that they stumble on online, and it shapes their politics. The online has literally even led to the rise of radical politics. Remember, the alt-right breadtube and all those stuff, like, they sprouted online. And other online movements like BLM and the Me Too movement, born through hashtag activism. Very important movements that led to real-world consequences born online. The ignoring of the fact that, like, the internet plays a vital role is just ludicrous to me. AOC, remember, AOC didn't get to where she was through, like, she literally had to start online and build her message online to raise money online. I guarantee you that even in the real life activism, she had to organize them through the internet. Like, there's a reason why a lot of, like, progressive, like, candidates and activists still spend a lot of their money on online ads, because that's where they know their audience is. They know their audience is going to be online. And I mean, yeah, they managed to win a couple of offices through that online activism. Like, on the thumbnail, you see that there's a Palestinian flag there, the Palestinian emoji flag, because online activism is what's leading to Palestinian movements rising. Like, remember, not that long ago, like, the idea that there would be a majority of people that would be pro-Palestinian would be ludicrous. It would be outrageous. Remember, literally in, 2009, 2010, like, right before Anthony Weiner, like, resigned, Anthony Weiner was, like, one of the furthest left members of Congress. And he literally was yelling and shaming Palestinians and saying, like, get their terrorist ass out of here. Literally. And now, furthest left politics in the United States is someone who will literally not vote in favor of Israel being a state. The online pendulum has shifted. That's not nothing. Like, literally, if you were pro-Palestinian, you were, like, for a while, you literally just could not be in politics if you were pro-Palestinian. That was just not a thing you could do. Now, we're at a point where it looks like being openly pro-Israel is starting to be a political detriment. Mitt Romney literally spilled and said that the reason why they banned TikTok was specifically because the online politics was important and shifting real-world sentiment, particularly on the issue of Israel-Palestine. It's not nothing. And yes, for better or for worse, a lot of the future generations, Gen Alpha, like, people like to say that Gen Z grew up with the internet, and that's true, but Gen Alpha is going to be 10 times more connected to the internet. Like, I'm Gen Z, and I didn't really have that much of a connection to the internet. Granted, let me see. I'm trying to remember my, like, history, like, with directly internet. I think for a long while I did used to have an AOL Mac computer. Not Mac, but like an AOL computer that literally, like, did the dial-up noise. But it wasn't really until, like, when was the iPhone, like, officially released? I mean, I just did a quick check on, like, MacBooks, and the one that I remember is, like, it looks very similar to the 2009 model, so I'm gonna say, like, around, like, 2010. Like, that's really when I kind of, like, really got into the internet. When I was a kid, I didn't really have that much access to the internet. Though, granted, I might have been poor, or, like, a lower middle class, I don't know. But before that, my internet sphere was literally just, like, I guess technically, yeah, I did have, like, access to the internet before then, because I remember, I had to be at least 7 when I first got on the internet. No, maybe. I had to be, because 2007 is kind of like when the introduction of, like, the Meme YouTube happened. So, yeah, I'm about to say probably then. And a lot of people on Gen Z did grow up with the internet. That is a fact. We did grow up with, like, the big technological boom of the internet. But now, that technological boom has passed, and now Gen Alpha is going to be directly raised through the internet. Much like how my generation probably would say that they, like, a lot of people in my generation, like, a little younger, would probably say that they grew up with TV. Like, they grew up on TV. Like, TV is what made more of an influence on their life than their parents. Now we're having that with the internet. Gen Alpha is a completely new stage of life. That's why they're called Gen Alpha. That's why a lot of them are called that's why there's one specific nomer for them called the iGen or the Apple Gen, because they will literally be in a time period where the internet is fully matured and a lot of things can be had on it. And we're seeing it now with a lot of young boys falling victim to like a bunch of these like weird like macho man YouTubers, like Sneeko or whatever, or like Andrew Tate or like all these other kind of people. Like, we're seeing it already with them. Granted, and that's another thing that I wanted to like, I'll address this a little bit later, hopefully, if I don't ramble about it. But the ignoring of this connection is not really notable. Though I guess I should answer this before I like go off topic but is the sentiment built online? And that's one of the questions I wanted to like answer to an extent with the documentary, with the essay, I guess, was that, is the internet what is influencing us, or are we influencing the internet? Because we've heard this before. TV's influencing our kids, video games are influencing our kids, internet is influencing our kids. Like, we've heard this argument before. And, well, is it? Or is the stuff that we already have in our bloodline, in our like minds, is the way that humans are, is that put to the internet and then brought out again? Like, I mean, yeah, Adolf Hitler didn't need to make TikToks with Subway Surfer on the side and Family Guy clips on the bottom talking about how his crazy fringe political views. He didn't have to do that at all. But if the internet hadn't existed, would the alt-right have grown to the capacity that it would have if we didn't have it? I mean, maybe. We have like far-right anti like black and like we have far-right fascist sentiment in the United States without the internet. The KKK existed. Again, American Nazi Party existed. They didn't need the internet to like look up Hitler's like views or like make up bullshit about like conspiracies. They didn't need that. They did it through books and papers. But are we then going to blame the internet for the bad things that happened? And I say that I wanted to like kind of answer the question. I mean, it is part of like the like trailer for the episode. Like, why are we like this? Why is this a thing? Blah 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 blah. Why? Like, it asks all those questions. But when you actually watch the episode, you'll see the answer to the questions, if not there. I also want to say this a little bit before the episode. I made that trailer literally before I started work on any of the editing and recording for that episode. I recorded that part specifically for the trailer, and I included a bunch of segments of things I thought I was going to talk about or discuss in the thing. And there are a couple of things that are not mentioned in the documentary that are in that trailer that I'll just have to say right now. If you're waiting for that specific part of the documentary, then I'm going to have to tell you right now, you're going to be disappointed. I don't really talk about the clip of the American Dream movie. I don't really talk about that. I talk about I actually don't want to give away too much of what I do talk about, but I don't talk about that specific documentary. I did briefly contemplate adding a section about net neutrality and the fight for that, but I couldn't really find a place to put it, so unfortunately, that part isn't going to be in it either. Though, apparently one of the women in there is a member of the alt-right. I think the one with black hair or whatever. So there's definitely like a little bit of things there that I could have used that as a transition talking about the alt-right, but you know, whatever. It's not really that important. And there's another part in there. Oh yeah, I don't mention Alex Jones a lot in the documentary, which is very weird. I thought I was gonna mention him a lot more. I didn't even mention Cenk Uygur a lot in the documentary. In fact, I literally, when I was writing it, I was like, oh yeah, wait, I haven't mentioned Cenk Uygur at all up to this point. That's weird. And there are also some parts that I probably didn't need to add in the documentary, but you know, the purpose of it is sort of like, it's kind of like a literal rabbit hole. I think I say it literally in the beginning of the episode. It's time to go down the rabbit hole. And the format, I kind of wanted to go with a idea that kind of resembled like literally like, again, going down the online rabbit hole. Where you'd like go online, you'd click, and you'd end up on like the weird part of the internet. And I'll also say this, and I'll say this, I just want to say this right now for anybody, because I want to make this very abundantly clear. Be prepared for it to not live to your expectations. I'm sorry, but I just gotta be real. I'm genuinely sorry that the video is not going to be as good as it should be. There are going to be a lot of segments that I'm just not going to finish. I mean, I have to literally finish it by the 1st, and I know for a fact that I'm going to literally have to spend the 2 days prior exporting it and uploading it due to how long the video is going to be. And there were multiple times while working on it, I legitimately just thought about quitting the video because I was just like, I just wanted to be done, man. I just wanted to be done. It'll be released on the 1st. No ifs, ands, or buts. And I'm going to leave a comment and be like, look, I know it's not finished. It's not finished. I know it's not finished. But I would rather release this video unfinished and be mentally sane than continue working on it for the rest of the year and be like insane. In fact, literally one section of the video I had to literally cut out. Don't worry, it was a last minute addition anyways, so I'm not necessarily I wasn't necessarily too enthused with the video with that particular subject already. If you're a patron, I might record that specific segment and then just upload the audio or like whatever, because I had like a transition ready for it and everything, but again, I just didn't have time. Much like I don't have time to finish it. I'm sorry. I have to finish the last segment, which is going to be a rather short segment, and then I have to edit the intro and ending. I specifically added this intro because I wasn't going to add this intro originally, but due to the fact that there's going to be a lot of segments that's just going to like fucking ruin this episode, I included a segment at the beginning to basically be like, yeah, sorry, bro. This episode's going to stink. Hopefully, the audio of the episode makes up for it. Hopefully, you can excuse the bad visuals. Genuinely bless all the people who are able to do these kind of video essays consistently. I ain't doing anything like this ever again. And I'm also taking precautions to make sure that certain things don't happen in case there's an influx of people that watch this video. Who cares if there is or isn't? I don't know. Genuinely, I just don't care. I genuinely just want to be done, move on, and go back to a consistent video schedule. Though granted, it might have to wait because I think the week after it comes out, okay, it's going to come out on the 1st, and then I don't know how long it's going to be. It will be, I think, the idea that I have in my head right now is that I will then post a podcast also on the 5th, but then after that, I will be on vacation for a couple of days, and it will probably be up to, and it probably will prevent a podcast being released on the 12th. I don't know. Let me know what you guys think, if I should just fully not do anything on that week, or if I should have a podcast, whatever, on that day. I do have an idea for a podcast, and it'll probably just be like a short, simple one. But yeah, everything will be come back in full force on the Thursday after the 1st, like the 15th, not the 15th, not the 8th. The 8th, again, no, not the 8th. That week, or at least the latter half of that week, will not be anything. But yeah, after I finish all this editing, I'm immediately going to jump on working on the next project. Hopefully that project also gets some love too. Thanks for watching this video. Be sure to like, comment, share, subscribe, and click the bell to notify when a future video of mine comes out. And if you're interested in more content from me, consider supporting me on Patreon.